Don't mind the mess in here. I'm moving things around. It's the same room as always, but I'm at a limited capacity with this broken arm. So it's going to look a little chaotic back there for a little bit, okay? I hope you're okay with that. And for some reason, when I turn on the lights, like the little like pink and blue light that's going on, it like makes the picture go crazy for some reason and flickers like mad. So it's pretty bare bones looking right now. And yeah, so that's what's happening here. But without dwelling on that too long, we're here to talk about Jimmy Eat World. Now around the early 2000s, Jimmy Eat World were one of the top emo, pop punk adjacent bands going. Songs like Bleed American, The Middle, and The Sweetness were on high rotation all over the place. Everybody loved these songs. It crossed the divide from like mainstream rock fans to emo kids, pop punkers. Jimmy Eat World was getting everybody's attention. But it wasn't always that way. Hey, how's it going? It's the Punk Rock Observer Dan Frampton here, and today we're looking at the peculiar case, the interesting study of Jimmy Eat World. Now, some bands have gotten new singers and everything is fine, but it's not often, it's actually very rare that a band switches singers with the members that are currently in it. And that is exactly what happened with our friends in Jimmy Eat World. This Tom Linton guy started off as the vocalist, and back in the day when these guys put out their early demos or whatever, they were like a pop punk, kind of like a LA flavored type band, even though they were from Arizona. And Tom Linton's vocals were very snotty, very gruff, and they suited the style at the time. They didn't really catch on, and they weren't really getting a whole lot of fans back in the day. So eventually, this guy over here, this Jim Atkins guy, he would become the singer, but that wouldn't be the case until a little bit down the road. They put out their self-titled LP independently, and then Christie Front Drive, another band that was going on at the time, they were like, we're gonna do a little split with these guys. And the story goes that Christie Front Drive didn't put their best foot forward on this thing. They actively knew they were putting like a weaker song on this thing, but then when they heard Digital, the song that Jimmy Eat World put on this thing, they were like, oh man, we severely under-delivered. And back in the early to mid 90s, you had to do everything yourself to get yourself out there. There wasn't really a whole lot of internet to get all the contacts and stuff, but thank God for Maximum Rock and Roll, this fanzine that was more than a fanzine. It had contributors from all over the country, and they put out this little guide over here, Book Your Own Fucking Life, but it was during the promotion cycle of that 7-inch when it caught the ear of capital A&R guy Lauren Israel, okay? And he was like, oh my God, this song Digital is crazy, and this band, they have a knack for a hook. They know what a verse is, they know what a chorus is, because if you don't know, this like Digital song, it's a pretty long number, it's multifaceted. It's not the kind of song that you would expect that would capture an A&R exec, but Capitol were desperate to get the new rock and roll band that was going to be super hot because Geffen had Beck. Geffen had Nirvana. And Lauren Israel was like, I want to have the next big band. So he got to working. Now Jimmy Eat World at the time, really small band from Arizona, not really catching fire or anything like that. They get approached by an A&R guy. It can't be considered selling out by any stretch of the imagination because they didn't have the fan base to turn on them and call them sellouts. Okay? So this like record over here, Static Prevails, even though it had this Capitol logo right on the front, it didn't really affect things too much. But it didn't really affect things in a very positive way either, because the sales on this thing were abysmal as well, maybe 10,000 units. Tom and Jim would be sharing lead vocal responsibility on this thing, and it doesn't really feel focused. It meanders all over the place, and it's clear that they haven't really found their artistic vision yet. And even though the punk scene wasn't mad about this record or whatever, when they saw that Jimmy Eat World was a part of this whole Surge thing, do you remember this drink? There was this drink called Surge, and anyway, they put out this compilation disc over here with like a whole bunch of coupons or whatever, and Jimmy Eat World was plastered all over this thing, and the punk scene was like, that's pretty whack, guys. We don't like that. So your record that you put out over there, Static Prevails, it's gonna stay at 10,000 units sold, if that's all right with you. We're not gonna be jumping on this thing. And Surge recently made a comeback. It's just kind of like like a Mountain Dew ripoff, if that's not obvious by the way that it looks. Now, I'm not really here to do a whole history of Jimmy Eat World, just the curious time that they switched singers, but it is interesting to note how they got their name, because Jim, as a kid, used to fight with his brother Ed all the time, but Jim would win frequently, and Ed would draw this picture of Jim eating a world as if to say that he was fat. So if you're looking back here at the original artwork for their self-titled release, it's kind of based on all of that, okay? You got the boys fighting, you got the guy in the headlock, and Jimmy Eat World, and to think he wasn't even like the lead singer, and he didn't even go by Jimmy or anything like that. He's Jim. So now the punk scene's kind of turning on them because of this Surge thing. They're not really selling a whole lot, so it's obvious that they get super surprised when Capitol is like, hey, we want another record from you guys. They're like, oh, what? Are you serious? That's gotta be crazy. So they go into the studio to record this thing, Clarity, and they're going into it completely different, okay? Yeah, they started more as a skate punk band, but then when Static Prevails came out, they were doing like this post-hardcore thing that was kind of confusing. They went into the studio with more than just a punk rock arrangement of instruments, okay? There was like cellos and chimes and wind instruments. These guys were chomping at the bit to put out something ambitious and creative. So they got to work on this thing over here, Clarity, which is very lush. The instrumentals are so cool on this record. It's a real good like exploration in sound palettes and atmospheres. It's almost like cinematic in a way. And after it was finished, Capitol had it and they weren't going to release it. Now that story exists all over the rock and roll history, where a band records a masterpiece, but the label doesn't put it out. And that was going to be the fate of this thing over here. But then this film over here with Drew Barrymore came out called Never Been Kissed, and they wanted a Jimmy Eat World song, and that song caught some ears, and then they were like, okay, I guess we're gonna release your record now, and they did, to massive reviews over here, okay? This is Pitchfork. Now, I don't really like Pitchfork all that much. I don't necessarily agree with Pitchfork all the time, maybe 2 or 3% of the time, but 8.6 is a pretty good rating for this record. And it's actually kind of monumental because Pitchfork doesn't like emo, they do not like pop punk, they think that's all like melodramatic child stuff. But it's on this record here where Jim finally takes the vocal helm. And he's just in a creative zone. He knows the kinds of songs he wants to craft, and he has so much to write about. But Clarity, as you know, isn't the record that blew up for this band. Yes, this is like the technical record. Yes, this is kind of like the hipster's favorite. But the record that blew them up only got 3.5 on the same publication over here, Pitchfork, when they put out Bleed American. This thing has all the songs that you know, all the songs that you love, all those riffs, all those vocal lines, all that sweat that you can just imagine pouring off the face of Jim as he's delivering all these tunes, okay? That's what this record is. It holds the test of time. 3.5 is a laughable score. There's so many bangers on this thing. Yeah, it's not quite as much of an artistic statement as Clarity or whatever, but it's just such a solid, fun record. And by this time, it was clear that like the pop punkers weren't gravitating towards this band back in the day. The skate punkers, the post-hardcore kids, they weren't really fucking with Jimmy Eat World. But when this record came out, the entire world was fucking with Jimmy Eat World. Well, except for Pitchfork over here. To say this record is for TRL addicts and it's in the same league as Sum 41 and American Hi-Fi is just ignorant and stupid. And that is exactly what he says here. So the band didn't sell out because they couldn't, and when they switched singers, they blew up. And if it wasn't for Lauren Israel, then Capitol would have never taken the chance on this small band from Arizona to develop them. And isn't that a novel thought? In 2023, that's not a thing. Major labels don't develop artists anymore, but to spend that many years on a band, flop after flop, and to just believe in them until they hit it, that's what happened here, even though this record didn't come out on Capitol. And it might be this kind of poetic irony that it actually came out on DreamWorks, which is like a sister label of Geffen, the label that really made Lauren Israel like super inspired to get a new hot band, and that is the label that his new hot band ended up on with their biggest record. Yeah, well, that's the story here. And the story of Jimmy Eat World is a very unique story indeed. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Leave a couple pancakes down there in the comment section. Ring the bell if you're cool as hell. And until my next upload, you can watch another upload.